Hi, third grade mathematicians. It's Mrs. Moore here, and today I get to teach you lesson 1 of our capacity and weight unit. By the end of our lesson today, you will be able to determine the most appropriate customary unit to use to measure liquid volumes. And our customary units that we will be learning about today are cups, pints, quarts, and gallons. As always, third graders, to ensure that you can participate in this lesson with me, please make sure you have out a scratch piece of paper, a pencil, and even your district math packet, because there are some vocabulary pages that are going to be very helpful for our lesson and for your assignment today. So let's begin by reviewing what you already know about volume and capacity. The amount of liquid that a container holds is called its capacity or volume. Think of some containers around your house that hold liquid. How much liquid do they hold? And how do we measure this liquid? So I would like for you to pause the video and think of some containers in your house that hold liquid. You can even get up and look around. Pause the video and write down any containers in your house that currently hold liquid, like water or a sauce. Go ahead. What did you find? When I looked around my house, I saw a vase with water and flowers. It holds liquid. I also thought of the glass of water that I have right next to me. It has a capacity of water. I thought of a bathtub or a sink. And then I opened my fridge and I noticed that there were cartons of juice and milk that all hold liquid, and even sauces and yogurts. Yes, those containers all hold liquid. At the top of your scratch paper today, would you please write down that capacity is the amount of liquid a container can hold. That definition will be helpful for you today. Now I'd like for you to think about ways that we measure liquid. So think of when your parents are baking. How do they know how much liquid to put into a recipe? How do they measure that liquid? Fantastic, yes. So we measure liquid using different measuring cups around the house. And that allows us to measure out the liquid to know that we're adding the exact right amount into our recipe. So make sure that you remember that the amount of liquid a container holds is called its volume or capacity. And the larger the container, the larger capacity it has. It can hold more of a liquid. So let's think of some of these containers that I found around my house. So like a water bottle holds liquid, a pitcher, a travel size shampoo, a bucket, and a jug of milk. You'll notice that all of these different objects hold a different amount of liquid. They have different capacities. So we measure different objects with different units. And I'm going to introduce you to these units right now. So we measure capacity using standard units, just like we use standard units for measuring length. There are actually 2 systems of measurement units, customary and metric. We get to learn about both during this unit, but today we will learn all about customary units. Third graders, what's capacity? Say it out loud. Yes, it's the amount of liquid a container can hold. These are our customary units of capacity: cups, pints, quarts, and gallons. And they're in order from the smallest to the largest. We measure really small amounts of liquid using cups. The school lunch comes with an exact cup of milk. Recipes may actually only call for a fractional part of a cup. So the way that Mrs. Moore always remembers how much liquid is in a cup is I think back to school lunches. When you get that little carton of milk on your tray, that's exactly a cup of milk. So lock that in your brain, that a cup of milk is just like that little carton that you or your friends get at school. To measure medium or larger amounts of liquids, we use pints or quarts. So small containers of ice cream or small containers of juice are pints. And a little bit larger quarts are also standard units of capacity that we use to measure medium amounts of liquid, like a pitcher of lemonade. When I consider quarts, I think of like a pitcher of lemonade or a jug of juice in my fridge. Those are measured in quarts, medium amounts of liquid. When I think of gallons, I know it's our largest unit of measurement. So I think of a gallon like a gallon jug of milk in my fridge that I would use to enjoy with my family for up to 2 weeks. It's the largest amount. So we would measure the capacity of a swimming pool or a bathtub or the whole sink in gallons. I'm going to just show you a couple of references so that you can really understand these. So I'm showing you a gallon, a quart, a pint, and a cup of milk so that you can compare the amounts and get more familiar. So pause the screen and think if you've ever seen these amounts of milk and what you remember about them. Yes, so a gallon jug of milk would be something you would have in your fridge if you wanted to enjoy it with your family for up to 2 weeks. A quart of milk would maybe be what smaller families would purchase because they don't drink it quite as frequently. We know that there's 4 quarts of milk in a gallon. A pint of milk would maybe be what you would purchase if you only use a little bit of milk in your coffee each day, or you only use milk very, very rarely. And then you remember a cup of milk is what you get at school each day. It's enough just to enjoy one time during a meal or a lunch or a dinner. So I want you guys to get familiar with the number of smaller units that make up a larger unit. So I know 2 cups are equal to 1 pint. 2 pints are equal to 1 quart, and 4 quarts are equal to 1 gallon. You also have this page in your district packet. This would be a good one to have out too. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, if gallon is the largest amount, how many standard units equal 1 gallon? So I would like to show you. So 4 quarts is equal to 1 gallon. 8 pints is equal to 1 gallon. And 16 cups is equal to 1 gallon. That's why a gallon of milk lasts in your fridge for a very long time, because there are 16 cups in a gallon. So it would take you 16 times pouring 1 cup to enjoy with a meal to finish the entire gallon. Pause the video and study this, please. And would you also write down how much milk do you have in your fridge, if you have any at all? Do you have a gallon? Do you have a quart? Do you have a pint? Do you have a cup? How much milk is in your fridge? Thank you. In our fridge, we have 1 gallon of milk, and we drink a little bit every day. This is another way to help you remember. So I know G stands for gallon. So I know there are 4 quarts in a gallon. I know there are 8 pints in a gallon. And I know there are 16 cups in a gallon. It also helps you remember, well, in a quart, there are 2 pints. And in a quart, there are 4 cups. It also helps me remember that in a pint, there are 2 cups. So this really helps me remember the conversion of all of these customary units. How do they all fit together? Third graders, I want to talk a little bit about when we would use each unit of measure. So we measure small amounts of liquid in cups. For example, the school lunch comes with a cup of milk. We know that sometimes recipes may call for only a fractional part of a cup, like half a cup or a quarter or 3/4. Would you pause the video and think of some ways we'd use this small amount of liquid in real life? When would we use cups in real life? Write them down. What did you come up with? I came up with, when baking recipes, they often call for a cup or a fraction of a cup. If you buy a school lunch, the milk served to you is a cup of milk. A full glass of water is about 2 cups. And a mini water bottle contains a cup of water. So a standard mug holds about 2 cups of liquid. Did you come up with any other small amounts of liquid you would measure using cups? Yes, like if you were making coffee, that's measured in cups. Fantastic. If you were filling a glass of water, you would put in about a couple cups, 1 or 2. Awesome job. Okay, sweet peas, now let's look at quarts and pints. So medium amounts of liquid are measured in quarts and pints. Small families purchase a quart of juice or milk to enjoy throughout the week. Pints of liquid can be enjoyed by 1 or 2 people, so they're a smaller amount. When would we use these in real life? So quarts are if a family buys a carton of juice or milk to share for the week, they would be purchasing a quart of juice at the grocery store. Also think of if a family is treating themselves to ice cream, they would split a carton of ice cream, which has about 1.5 quarts. So think of quarts as sharing them with the family over like a week. Fantastic. Pints are smaller. If you were at a grocery store and wanted a personal drink from the fridge at the checkout counter, these drinks are sold in pints. So these are all examples of pints that you would get to either just have by yourself or maybe share with one other person. So there are personal little containers of juice and milk that are sold in pints, but they're bigger than a cup because there are 2 cups in a pint. If you wanted to share ice cream with a sibling or a parent, you would split a pint of ice cream into 2 bowls. You could even split it into 3 bowls. But this would be if you were just consuming it yourself or splitting with someone else, you would use a pint. But if you were splitting with 3 or 4 people, you would want to buy a quart of that liquid. So last but not least are gallons. The largest unit of measure is gallons. Think of like a gallon jug of milk or juice if you don't drink milk at home. Large capacities of liquid are measured in gallons. Families will buy a gallon of milk or juice for the whole family to enjoy for 1 to 2 weeks. So here are examples of gallons of a liquid. We use gallons in real life all the time, especially if you have a few siblings. You're going to want a large quantity or a large capacity of liquid so that you can all share this amount. So when grocery shopping, families will buy a gallon of milk or juice if they would like for it to last for a week or longer. You would measure the amount of water in the kitchen sink or a bathtub in gallons. Gallons of water. Wash your clothes during each washing machine cycle. Gallons of water would fill a mini swimming pool or even a large swimming pool. And if you were having a birthday party with multiple friends, you would want to buy a gallon of ice cream so that each person there could have an amount. Now would be a really good time to get out your capacity vocabulary sheet because it's going to really help you with these problems that we're going to do together. So you guys are going to choose which unit would be the most appropriate to measure the objects on my screen. I'm going to give you a hint though. For some of these objects, you could use more than one unit to measure the capacity. So let's go through together and make sure you have your vocab sheet handy because it's going to really help you. I'm going to grab out my highlighter. Okay, so we're going to decide which customary unit of measure would we use. So what would be the most appropriate unit to measure the capacity of this large bucket of water on my screen? Would we measure a large bucket of water in cups, pints, quarts, or gallons? And I hope you guys have your vocabulary reference out, but here I've cut part of it to be on our screen for a reference. So I'm going to go through. I know I wouldn't use cups because cups are used to measure small amounts of liquid, and a large bucket of water would have a lot more than a cup of water in it. So I know that pints are for slightly larger amounts of liquid, like a pint of ice cream. Ooh, there's way more than a pint of water in this large bucket. Then I think of quarts. Well, quarts I would think of like a pitcher of lemonade or a jar or a jug of juice in my fridge. A large bucket of water is going to be bigger than a quart of water. Ooh, so I know that gallons would be used to measure large amounts of liquid. So I know right away that I would use gallons to measure a large bucket of water. I'm going to highlight that. Now you guys are going to do some with me. Are you ready? Okay, which would be the most appropriate unit to measure the capacity of this vase for flowers with water? Could you use more than one kind of unit for this object? Pause the video and write down which customary unit you would use. What did you decide? What would be the best unit to measure the amount of water in this vase for flowers? This one could actually have more than one unit. So you could use cups because you'll see that it's a small amount of liquid in the bottom of this vase. But you could also use pints because we know that there are 2 cups in a pint. And so there's actually about a pint of water in here. So either unit would actually be appropriate. Quart wouldn't be appropriate because a quart is a lot larger than this amount of liquid. And a gallon would definitely not be appropriate. Why wouldn't a gallon be appropriate, 3rd graders? Yes, it's far too large. A gallon of water would not fit in that vase. Give yourselves a pat on the back. Let's try another one. Get your pencil ready. Ooh, so what would be the most appropriate unit to measure the capacity of this container of yogurt? Could you use more than one kind of unit for this object, and why? Pause the video and write down which one you would use. Use your reference sheet if it's helpful. Your answers are correct. You could use a cup. You could use cups to measure the amount of yogurt inside this container, to measure the capacity of the yogurt. You could also use pints. Fantastic. And sometimes yogurt is actually sold in pints, and this looks like it's about a pint of yogurt, and we know there are 2 cups in a pint. Quart would not be appropriate because a quart is much bigger than the amount of yogurt in this container. Nice job. Same with gallon. A gallon would be way too big. All right. This is the last one we're going to do together. I would like for you to pause your video and determine what would be the most appropriate customary unit of measure to measure the capacity of this pitcher of lemonade. I'm going to give you a hint. You could use more than one kind of unit for this object. What did you write down? Fantastic. Pint would be appropriate? Yes, because I know the amount of liquid in here is at least a pint, possibly even 2 or 3 pints. I also know that quart would be appropriate because large pitchers of juice are sold often in quarts. Fantastic. Gallon wouldn't be appropriate because this pitcher looks like it's smaller than a gallon, and cup wouldn't be as appropriate because there would be a lot of cups, and so we'd probably prefer to measure in pints and quarts. Okay, third grade listeners, this is your assignment for today, and it's very similar to the work that we just did together. So after you watch this video once or twice, use what you know about measuring liquid capacity to determine the appropriate customary units of measurement and explain your thinking. So I'm going to show you what I did. So for the first container, it was the kitchen sink filled with water. Well, I determined that the most appropriate unit to measure this capacity would be gallons, because if the kitchen sink was filled with water, there would be multiple gallons of water in the kitchen sink. And I explained how I know. The kitchen sink would hold over a gallon of water. You would measure the total amount of water in the kitchen sink using gallons. Let's do the next one together. A full Olympic-size swimming pool. So that would be a very large pool full of water. Which would be the most appropriate unit of measure? Definitely gallons. So when it says most appropriate unit of measure, you would write in gallons. Then you would explain how you know. You would say, well, a full-size Olympic swimming pool is massive, and so the amount of water in that swimming pool would be well over a gallon. So we would need to use the largest customary unit of measure. I am very proud of your listening today, third graders. I would like to give you a heads up that some of the containers that I've included are going to have more than one appropriate unit of measure. For example, if I said a pitcher of juice, you could use pint or quart. And if you put them both in this box, your answer will be correct. So it's okay if you have more than one appropriate unit of measurement. Thank you for your wonderful listening. As always, I'm very proud of you, and I can't wait to see your assignment.